When you sell vintage online, finding your items quickly and easily isn't optional, it's essential. Today, I'm pulling back the curtain on how I keep my Florida inventory organized and easy to manage without fancy software, expensive bins, or cabinets that take up a lot of space. My Florida inventory setup looks identical to my Michigan setup, but both hold an entirely different set of merchandise for my Etsy shop. By making this video showing you my setup, I'm not saying you need to do yours the same way. I'm just sharing the ideas that work for me, so maybe you can get some ideas. I'll be showing you what's currently super organized and what I'll be tackling after the holidays. Hi, I'm Carol, and I sell vintage home decor and collectibles on Etsy. Over the years, I've learned that staying organized isn't just about having neat shelves. It's about protecting your time and your sanity. When you've got hundreds of one-of-a-kind pieces, you can't afford to lose track of what's sold or where something's stored. So today, I'm sharing my real inventory, a deeper dive, if you will, than my previous inventory video. Nothing fancy, just what truly works for me. And maybe it'll spark an idea or two for how you can make your own setup run a little smoother. In my first inventory video, I focused on the big picture, but today I want to break down the details, how each bin is labeled, stored, and connected to my Etsy tracking system in Excel. So each bin is numbered. The bins in Michigan have different numbers, and each bin has either an F for Florida, an M for Michigan, for those in Michigan, or M and F, indicating that those are the bins. I think there are 5 in total, 2 vintage wedding, 2 vintage anniversary, and 1 bin has my video equipment in it for YouTube. There is also one smaller bin that holds some Etsy supplies that I take back and forth. In my earlier inventory video, I had not yet split my inventory for Michigan and Florida, and that was an entire process, but it's done now. Recently, I got all of the crystal that I was storing out on the shelf put into bins, and I found that 4 sets of Waterford Marquise iced tea glasses had actually not ever been listed, so that was a win. I got those listed. You can't sell what you don't have listed. And I now have all of my Christmas merchandise out on my empty shelves, separated by stock keeping unit numbers. When I first arrived in Florida, that merchandise was in 2 big bins, and I learned right away when the Christmas items started selling that I would not want to be going through a big bin every time something sold, looking for one item among 30 or so in each big bin. It is my hope that I sell most of this and I don't have to pack it away into bins for next year after Christmas. Now that you've seen what my storage setup looks like here, let's take a look at how I actually keep track of what's in each bin where it lives. My inventory sheets are by year in the file. For each year, I begin listing that year's new inventory with the year and 1, 2, 3, and so on. So the first item I listed in 2025 is SKU number 2025-1. When I source items and bring them home, I immediately list them into my inventory sheets, and I put the receipt away in this basket for tax purposes later. My husband is in charge of that. Then I attempt to get that item cleaned and then photographed and listed as soon as possible. Sometimes that takes a little while, a week or 2, so I leave it sitting out where I have to continue to look at it until I list it. A little mind game with myself, but it works. Once I've listed an item, I carefully wrap that item to keep it safe in the bin and to keep it clean so I don't have to wash it again before I ship it. I write the SKU, the SKU number, on the wrapping of the item. If it's a set, I'll put 1 of 2, 2 of 2 if I wrap them separately. I find a bin where there is room for that item. There's no keeping them in order because the items are always selling and there's always vacancies in bins. And I write the SKU number of that item on a paper that's attached to the top of the bin. These are scrap papers I save from what I cut off of the bottom of shipping labels. Then I note on the Excel sheet which bin that item is stored in. When I make a sale, I go to my inventory sheet first. It's easiest for me to refer to the Etsy app on my phone for this part rather than going back and forth between windows on my desktop. I fill in all the numbers. I do highlight that item so that my husband can pull that line and put it into our sold file. I note the amount it was sold for. Was there an offsite ad, the customer name, the customer location. I see what bin that item is in. I go to that bin, cross the number off the list on the lid of the bin, pull the item, and then I pack it for shipping. I weigh it. I put the final weight and dimensions into the Etsy shipping page to see the final shipping cost. And once I know that, then I also go back to my inventory sheet again, and I put that actual shipping cost into my inventory sheet. Now, as you can probably guess, this system did not come together overnight. Remember, I've been on Etsy for 3 years. I've definitely learned a few things the hard way about what works and what really doesn't when it comes to storing vintage. I group by category are vintage wedding, vintage anniversary, and Christmas. The evergreen wedding and anniversary items I do take back and forth between Michigan and Florida. The vintage Christmas always stays in Florida, but I like to keep it separate because I move it to inactive listings between January and October. Otherwise, I would be rifling through it along with everything else when I was trying to pull regular merchandise to ship throughout the year. So I do keep it separate. Otherwise, I put new items where they fit in the bins. I do sort of start towards the lower numbered bins and try to always have those filled up. And that always leaves me a little bit of room in my higher numbered bins. I do have a few narrower but taller bins that fit between my regular bins on my shelving for larger items like this pitcher that don't fit in the regular bins. But I try not to source anything that won't fit in my regular bins. That's one of my little tests for, am I going to buy this? I do wrap silverplate items, which my husband always shines up beautifully before I photograph, in fabric to help keep them from tarnishing when they're waiting to be sold. I have a bunch of old pillowcases for that. Otherwise, most items are wrapped in packing paper, bubble wrap for the really fragile items. And I do try to be a good steward of wrapping and shipping supplies. Everything gets used and reused. Paper wrapping that's placed around items in bins is reused as packing in shipping boxes. I wrap items in bubble wrap or tissue paper for shipping, not the packing paper. Bubble wrap that fragile items are wrapped in for storage is left on items for shipping, and I probably will add a little bit more bubble wrap before I ship it. The only wrapping I ever don't reuse is newspaper. That is a favorite of antique stores, and I think it's nasty. I think it's messy. It leaves residue on vintage items. It definitely leaves ink on your hands. I like to think it's already lived enough lives by the time it makes it to my house that I can retire it, and I do. Oh, and that closet full of Currier and Ives ironstone that stays in Florida because it's so heavy. Currier and Ives sold like crazy for me in 2023, so I just kept sourcing it. But it has since dropped off in popularity. I think I seldom sell a piece of Currier and Ives anymore. But I have a lot of it stored in my guest room closet. And it's really too heavy to store in bins, at least in the amount that I have currently. I'm hoping it'll regain popularity in 2026 for the America 250 celebration when Supposedly, Colonial Revival will become popular again. If it does not start selling in the spring of 2026, however, I intend to mark it down and really try to get it sold in the fall of 2026 so I don't have to keep storing it and so I can recoup some of my money back out of it. I love it, but I have a full set of my own in Michigan, and I just can't keep holding on to the stock that I have here in Florida. Here's how I maintain my system so that it continues to work season after season. Every once in a while, the papers on the tops of the bins get messy from me crossing off SKU numbers of sold items. So then I'll just take another piece of scrap paper, copy over the SKUs that still remain in that bin, and tape a new paper to the top of the bin when they need it. Twice a year, just before I go to Michigan in April and just before we come back to Florida in September, I do a complete inventory check, which usually takes me an entire day. I go through every bin and physically make sure what is actually in it. I remove everything from the bin and I put everything back and double check the SKU numbers that are listed on the top of the bin. Takes me a whole day. Sometimes it takes me 2 days. It's a big process, but as careful as I am throughout the year, I always find something that I didn't know was lost, or I will find something that I know was lost. Either way, it's a win. Drop a note in the comment if you would like to see me actually doing that physical inventory next spring. I'm more than willing to share that process with you. If you'd like to start a system like this with bins, I suggest you start small. The bins I use cost about $14 a piece. My husband gets them at a home improvement store. We always buy the same bins so that they will stack on top of each other on those narrow areas of shelf that we have for them to fit into. We have the same shelves here in Florida that we have in Michigan. Use part of your profit from Etsy each month to build your system. Keep your receipts though, so you can count them as a business expense on your taxes. I'm not a tax expert or even a tax novice. I just know to save those receipts. They'll come in handy. You don't have to overhaul your whole space. Just set up one bin a week and you will start seeing how much smoother it makes your processes. And you won't have to search for items when they sell. If staying organized feels overwhelming, start small. The goal isn't perfection, it's peace of mind. And every small system you build adds up. One bin, one label, one shelf at a time. Before long, you'll notice that when your space is organized, your business starts to feel more peaceful too. I'm going to depend on this system in January to sort through old inventory and decide what stays, what gets bundled, and what moves on either to my booth or back to a thrift store. So if that's something you'd like to see, make sure you're subscribed, you have your notifications turned on, and leave a comment down below for me. And since we've been talking about how staying organized saves time when things sell, let's move on and look at something that sold in my shop this week. This one's a great example of how having everything labeled and easy to find makes shipping a whole lot smoother. One of the items that sold in my shop this week was a beautiful Wallace Hollywood Silver Luxor flatware set. Silver plated, one of those timeless mid-century patterns that always photographs well and feels elegant on a table. I sourced it right here in Florida at Goodwill back in March of 2024. Now, I paid kind of a pretty penny for this because they had these priced individually, so that always ends up costing more. But I just sold the set for $80. My cost of goods sold was $32.10, which means I had a gross profit of $47.90, which is about a 60% margin, right on target. And it was about 149% return on investment. And the best part? Because everything in my bins is labeled and tracked by stock keeping unit number, I knew exactly where to find it. No digging, no stress. That's the payoff for staying organized. You save time and every order feels smooth from sale to shipment. Have a great day.